Tom Halverson, thank you so much for being with us again to talk about coronavirus and its impact on the economy. We really appreciate it. First question for you is, where do you think, from today's vantage point, we are on the trajectory of this crisis, and do you think we are close to the midpoint yet?
I think we are a lot closer to the midpoint on the health crisis itself. If I define it as, when do we hit the peak of the rate of growth and so forth, and the number of people who are infected and the pressure on the health system and all that stuff. I think we're probably pretty close to the peak of that. It'll probably middle of April, but then it'll still be coming down for a few weeks. As it relates to the economic consequences, i.e., how long will the economy continue to contract? How much will it contract? How high will unemployment grow? I think we're in much earlier part of that process. And we won't start to have a recovery until we get through the health crisis sufficient for us to come up with the criteria under which it becomes possible to send people back to work.
What are the preconditions that we should be thinking about that will be necessary for a recovery to start to occur?
We've got to get to a point where public health authorities, whether at the state level, federal level, local level, or what have you, get to a point where they think that the health crisis itself has been sufficiently contained, i.e. we've bent the curve enough that we don't continue to have rising infection rates and rising death rates. And that will allow public health authorities to start to decide what are the criteria under which we will allow businesses to reopen, people to return to work, and that will be some combination of ongoing public health constraints combined with a new testing regime and a way to allow people to go back to work and to allow the economy to reopen in some different, more controlled, scientifically oriented and organized kind of manner.
I want to talk about a subject that you've addressed a lot in customer meetings, on social media, and in other areas, and that's the level overall of indebtedness in our economy, both public and private, and how much of an effect that will have on our ability to recover quickly. And we've got a couple of charts that we're going to bring up as we talk about that. First one is showing public debt, which over a long time horizon, and I guess my question is, how much do you think our quite high levels of public indebtedness are going to have an impact on the United States as we go through this?
The reality is, on the one hand, we entered this terrible health and economic crisis from a position of great economic strength. All the macro indicators were terrific. On the other hand, on a long-term fiscal perspective, we entered this situation from a position of great weakness and vulnerability because our leverage levels were higher than they've been at any time in the history of the United States, other than I believe, if memory is correct, the end of the Civil War and the end of World War II, when we had borrowed tremendously to just ensure our national survival. And the unfortunate requirement to get us out of this situation is a vast expansion of fiscal activity, right? And we already had $1 trillion budget deficit before this started. Now revenue is going to collapse, the budget deficit is going to go up dramatically, and we're going to spend trillions of dollars in pump priming and fiscal activity to get the economy and consumers and so forth through this.
Let's talk about indebtedness in the private side of the economy, both consumer debt and corporate debt. We'll bring up a slide that shows consumer debt. When you look at that, what are your thoughts?
The consequence of this crisis will be that millions of people become unemployed. So we're going to have a real challenge with consumer debt because there are going to be a lot of consumers who quickly become more levered than they can handle. And what will happen, ironically, last time we had a crisis, it was a lot of private sector activity that precipitated the crisis. This is not precipitated by the private sector. It's an act of nature in the form of a virus. But when the private sector gets over-levered and has a catastrophic collapse of its ability to repay, what usually happens, and what is happening right now, is the government steps in to bail out the unsustainable balance sheet of the consumers on the one hand, and in this case, they will step in to bail out the unsustainable balance sheets of the private sector businesses as well.
looking at corporate debt, which is on the last slide, it's now over $28 trillion. Again, going into this crisis, we don't know what it is right today, but the latest data over 28 trillion, up quite a bit over the last decade. What do you think about when you look at that?
So again, like with the, this is a more upwardly sloping aggressive curve than the consumer debt one. And I can't tell you exactly what the profile will be when we look back at this 5 years from now, but I guarantee you that that number will stop going up like it is, and it'll start to go down. There'll be a lot of deleveraging in the corporate sector, and there'll be some sectors and many companies who find themselves in unsustainable circumstances. And as we've discussed before, terms and conditions and pricing and availability of credit for the corporate sector are going to come off meaningfully, as they always do when you have an economic contraction. Defaults will go up, capital will become more expensive, terms and conditions for borrowers will become tighter.
Switching gears to corporate philanthropy, talk about the board's decision to increase our Sharing Success Fund as part of our effort to alleviate this, the impacts of this crisis, and what we're looking for our customers to do to participate in that.
You know, we believe in leading by example, so we have increased already some of our corporate philanthropy activities. We've dedicated more dollars and resources to it, including that which we will do with and through our many thousands of customers all over the country. We don't know what's needed and what are great charitable causes and what are great needs in local communities, you know, on the breadth and depth of the country, but our customers do. They live there, they work there, they cover those territories, and therefore our Sharing Success program has been tremendously successful for many years. And so when this crisis came upon us, we said, wow, that tool really works. Our customers love it. It has tremendous success. We don't need to reinvent something here. As part of our strategy of corporate philanthropy in the face of this crisis, we said, let's just put more money into the Sharing Success program so that our customers, it's a matching arrangement, so that the total portfolio of resources that are available to our customers in the matching funds of Sharing Success, we increased by another $1 million, and therefore we'll be able to work through and with our customers to put more money to work, ideally in even more recipient organizations' hands more quickly than ever before, which we think is a very good idea under these circumstances.